I heard somebody say
Burn, baby, burn. Hey everybody, I'm John Granado. That's Lance Zerline. You can hear us mornings on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet, so you get all of our content here at SportsMap HOU. A lot of chatter about the Texans this week. Nick Caserio had his press conference, and he said they're taking calls, Lance, for that number 2 pick overall. You said they're making calls. Bit of a difference, but if they do trade out, how disappointing is that for everybody, the whole fan base?
Well, I don't think everyone's disappointed. If you believe that if the Texans, so there's people who believe, and I'm one of them. I mean, I believe if you don't love a quarterback, for example, don't draft a quarterback that you believe is going to get you fired. No one would. No one. That's not the way teams work. I know fans work that way.
Yeah.
Well, you got to do something, but I think for a majority of the people, it will be pretty disappointing because it looks clearly like there's 2 quarterbacks in this draft that you feel good about. Bryce Young is one of them, and C.J. Stroud's the other. And one of them would be there, and the assumption that, was that one of those players would be there for you, obviously, at number 2, and now the idea that you'd pass on that's going to be disappointing, I think, to a lot of people. But I would just say, building this team, you need more than just a quarterback. Yeah, you need quarterback, but you also need pass rush. You need defensive line help. You're going to need some linebacker depth to eventually take over for Denzel Perryman. You need safety help. You need wide receiver help.
But
there's a lot of stuff.
But the quarterback is obviously the most important.
The quarterback's the biggest one, yeah.
And here's the deal. Listen, we saw him pass on Sauce Gardner, and he turned out to be really, really good. That you can manage that if you're Nick Caserio. If C.J. Stroud turns out to be really, really good, and you passed on him and traded out of that spot, I mean, that's a fireable offense as well.
Yeah, there's no easy way out of it. You do your evaluation and you live with it. If you draft a guy who you don't love and he doesn't play well, you get fired. If you he had back-to-back drafts for the guy that you could have drafted at a position you needed, ends up becoming good players, he's going to get you fired. So it's imperative that you make it. If you're going to get fired either way, then do what you feel in your heart is the smart move. It's a smart move. And if you don't believe in a guy, you're not going to draft him. And, there's other things that go into this too. We've talked about, does David Mulgeta play into this for the Texans? Does any type of the Texans don't subscribe to any S2 scores, so I don't know that plays into anything, but they do have their own testing and cognition. And do they think he's a good processor, C.J. Stroud on tape? Now, we're assuming Bryce Young's going to be the first pick. If Bryce Young is not the first pick, then the Texans will draft a quarterback, and everyone will be. I'm telling you, any name other than Bryce Young you hear first, and you can bet that Houston's war room is going to jump up for joy, and they'll draft.
But that ain't happening.
But I don't think that's happening.
Bryce Young's going to be the first pick. And Nick Caserio at his press conference this week vehemently denied that he is going anywhere after this draft. We've been talking a little bit about what's happened. There have been no substantive talks about him leaving. You think this could well be his last draft, though? Maybe he won't be fired after the draft, but maybe he'll be leaving after the season, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
That maybe D'Amico is going to have a say in who the next general manager will be. How does this all look to you after this draft and after this season?
I think he'll stay after the draft. I think there was, he's still being paid over $5 million a year. I don't know if the Texans want to add him to the stack of people they have to pay who don't work here anymore. So my guess is they'll keep him for the year. And once the year is over, once 2023 is over, unless there is something that changes or, maybe D'Amico's really happy working with him, or maybe, the Hannah and Cal McNair really love the job that Nick is doing. If that happens, hey, he's still under contract. But if not, I think that, let's just say the team finishes with 6 wins, 7 wins. They want to go in a different direction. They'll get rid of Nick after the last game of the season, and then they'll immediately start the process of looking for a new general manager.
Suppose the draft picks all work out. Suppose he does like working. D'Amico likes working with. Suppose there's a lot of suppositions that he could stay. We could see Nick Caserio staying if they can, forget all the Jack Easterby stuff, and and they can put that aside and say, Nick Caserio is the only face left from the Jack Easterby era, because all the other people behind the scenes nobody knows, and so nobody cares about that. But there certainly could be. Now, If anything falters, though, I'm with you. I think this absolutely. We saw a different Nick Caserio after that last press conference last year, right?
Yeah, we did.
And I could certainly see where the McNairs would say, "Okay, we've seen enough of this. We got to go in another direction."
Yeah, and I think there's a very good chance that happens. I don't think it happens after the draft, but I do think it happens after the season's over. That's the timing of it. Makes more sense after the season's over. And I think if they're going to do that, that's when they would do that. And then, who would the candidates be? We'll see at that point if that happens. But I think Nick coming out and saying, I'm not going anywhere, I think that means, well, number one, if you want to get rid of me, you got to fire me and pay my contract. Number one, I'm not just going to leave. I'm not stepping down. So I think for him to say that, he feels confident that he's not going anywhere. And John McClain had something that Nick Caserio's not leaving the team that he tweeted seemed fairly definitive. And I know that John's got a background with Cal McNair. So I would say that that's probably where that's coming from. So I would lock in on Nick Caserio for the year. But after the year's over, all bets are off.